True leadership comes from vision, meaning you can see things before most people do, and you can tell the future before it happens. This is the foundation of sound business planning. Hello again. Welcome to The Ruthless Truth. I am your host, Truth Davis. In this forum, I share opinions, thoughts, truths on a wide variety of topics based on what I consider to be a unique life experience. I'm an inner city kid who ascended to the C-suite of a Fortune 100 company. So I've seen some things. And you can read the details in the notes, the bio, the profile. My intent is to share stories and experiences and hopefully provide some guidance to you as you make it through your life and career journey. Please follow me on Instagram at TruthDavis5, subscribe to the YouTube channel Ruthless Truth, and there's also a Facebook page, Ruthless Truth. General format, I'll share some initial commentary on current news or just my thoughts. Then I'll pick one topic and go deeper on it, and that'll be today's truth. And then I'd like to end with an American history fun fact. I can't believe we're halfway through August. Summer is almost over. And for school kids in the South, summer really is over as most of them have returned to the classroom. I guess the time flies by when you're busy, and it's definitely been a busy summer. When I think about discussing just the events of the past week, I feel like an old Southern black preacher. Oh, I wish I had more time. And hopefully at least one of you yelled the appropriate response. Take your time, Reverend. Okay, where to start? Iran war update. Okay, Strait of Hormuz is not open. The president says the war will end soon. Gas prices continue to rise. No exit plan in sight. Okay. Another point regarding the president. Now, I think even his most ardent supporters would agree that he's not a very gracious or considerate person. And while I have low expectations, sometimes he can still find a way to shock and disappoint. This past weekend, Hunter Biden gave an update on his father, Joe Biden. He said the cancer had spread to his bones and that the former president is not doing well at all. So a reporter asked Trump if he had any comment. And here's what he said, and I quote, "If you feel sorry for him, don't feel so sorry because he's cruel. What he did to his political opponent and all the people he hurt, and he hurt a lot of people. So I really don't feel sorry for him." End quote. Wow. He could have chosen to say nothing at all. Or he could have given a generic platitude like, well, that's obviously not good news. But no, he decided to take a shot at him and then express no humanity, no grace. Sometimes I wonder if he has a soul. All right, I've tried to avoid it, but I have to say something about the Women's National Basketball Association, familiarly known as the WNBA. Now, many of you already know I am a huge fan of most sports, and the WNBA is no exception. I watch 2 to 4 games a week, and I can say this is the best season in the 30-year history of the league. The quality of play is outstanding, and there are great individual stories, such as the emergence of rookie Olivia Miles, who is already one of the best players in the league. But lately, most of the league headlines are about everything other than basketball. Now, I realize there has been a racial undertone for the past couple of years, coinciding with the arrival of Caitlin Clark. And there's no questioning her impact, having elevated the profile of the WNBA, resulting in higher ratings, larger attendance, and significantly higher salaries for all players. And while Ms. Clark has never stated a political position, many conservatives have adopted her name and experiences as a symbol in broader cultural and political debates. Just last month, a group of 11 Republican lawmakers sent a letter to the WNBA commissioner, Kathy Engelbert, demanding the league take, quote, accountability for multiple attacks on the court against Caitlin Clark. The lawmaker said they're concerned by reports that attacks against Clark may be racially motivated. And now some in the black community are complaining about the special treatment for Clark because, in their eyes, she's the great white hope and is actually overrated as a player. Okay, this needs to stop. Now, while I don't believe she's the best player in the league, there's no denying her talent, and she is clearly a top 10 player. And beyond the Caitlin discussion, the WNBA has another political issue. Last month, Caitlin's Indiana teammate Sophie Cunningham found herself in the center of a trans athlete controversy. In an interview, she expressed her opinion that athletes should participate in the gendered sport of their birth, not the one they choose post-transition. You know, I don't think this is a hot take. I totally agree with this position because males are physiologically superior to females. They're bigger, stronger, and faster. This is biology. You know, it's not an opinion. And such a person would have an unfair advantage competing against athletes who were born female. But not only has this exploded into a national high-profile controversy, it now borders on the ridiculous, as two former NBA players recently announced that they now identify as female and are declaring themselves for the 2027 WNBA draft. Really? I mean, really? Can we please put all this tension and emotion-filled debate to rest and get back to just talking about basketball? As I said, this has been a great season. And my final comment on current news, so tired of hearing people complain about woke and wokeness. You know, originally, woke was a term in the black community meaning alertness to racial prejudice and social injustice. That's it. It was just a call for awareness. But conservatives and other political groups have hijacked the word and is now a dog whistle and code for any group, policy, culture, or progressive idea that they just don't like. Woke now means black, LGBTQ, trans, socialist, DEI, or just liberal. But here's my message to MAGA and all the other groups who rail against wokeness. As said in the Malcolm X movie, I tell you again, you've been had. You've been took. You've been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok. Don't you see? Conservative politicians and talk shows get you all fired up about wokeness so that you have something or someone to blame for your own dissatisfied life situation, rather than take responsibility for yourself, or worse yet, make demands on your government. By getting you focused on wokeness, you probably missed the proposed cuts to domestic programs that will hurt many of you, such as $1.4 billion reduction in SNAP and WIC benefits that support 40 to 50% of all infants in this country. Second, a $10 billion cut in education and workforce development programs, okay? Terminating the $10 billion Medicare Part D subsidy, resulting in significantly higher prescription drug costs for seniors. And for you farmers, between the tariffs, the Iran war driving up the price of fuel and fertilizer, plus the elimination of support programs, you are getting hit the hardest. And there are many more domestic cuts coming. Why? Because the administration needs more money for the military budget. Oh, and none of these cuts go in effect until 2027, well after the midterm elections. So, you want to get woke about something? How about paying more attention to how the current administration is sticking it to you? Okay, let's get to today's truth. Today's truth. During the recently completed World Cup, a fascinating graphic was posted across multiple social media platforms. And it noted that of the 48 nations participating in the tournament, all but one of them had universal health care for its citizens. And the only one that didn't, the United States of America. And the rising momentum of the democratic socialist movement is strongly driven by the demand for Medicare for all. And just to clarify, Medicare for All is a proposed single-payer government-run national health insurance system. It would cover all U.S. residents, replace private and employer-sponsored insurance, eliminate out-of-pocket costs like copays and deductibles, and fund the care through taxes. Okay, so that's what it is. Which brings us back to the question, why doesn't the United States, the richest nation on the planet, have universal health care? Well, in today's truth, I'll tell you why there's no universal health care and explain why it will take a miraculous and Herculean effort for it to happen. Okay, let's start with a little bit of history. The first employer-sponsored hospitalization plan was created by teachers in Dallas in 1929. And because the plan only covered members' expenses at a single hospital, which was Baylor Hospital, it is also the forerunner of today's health maintenance organizations, or HMOs. Then in the 1930s, Franklin Roosevelt declined to include a healthcare program in the Social Security Act or in the New Deal. And it wasn't because he was facing opposition. There just didn't seem to be that much interest in it. And given all the problems they were dealing with at the time, it was easy to let go of a low priority program. Now, in the 1940s, the National War Labor Board was focused on inflation and inflation control. And so they denied wage increases for several union organizations. However, non-wage fringe benefits like health insurance were exempt from price controls. And so the result was that unions demanding increased compensation and employers competing for labor increasingly turned to non-controlled fringe benefits like paid sick time and health insurance as a primary compensation for labor. Makes sense. And recent research highlights how the American Medical Association, or the AMA's, 1940s campaign against national health insurance, emphasizing private insurance as a symbol of freedom, shaped today's costly U.S. healthcare system dominated by powerful medical lobbies. President Harry S. Truman proposed a system of public health insurance in his November 19, 1945 address. He proposed a plan available to all, yet optional, where workers would pay a monthly fee and the government and employers would cover medical costs at the time of need. And the proposal was quite popular with the public, but it was fiercely opposed by the Chamber of Commerce, the American Hospital Association, and the AMA, which denounced it as, wait for it, socialism. Over the subsequent decades, several proposals and attempts were made to implement universal health care in the United States, but none ever materialized. The only major health insurance development was the launch of the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, in 2010. And by the time the ACA was fully implemented in 2014, the U.S. population had experienced dramatic coverage gains. Nearly 20 million more people had coverage by 2016, with the uninsured rate falling to 10%. However, the Trump administration implemented some changes to the program, and now in 2026, approximately 28 million Americans do not have health insurance. The uninsured population is predominantly comprised of working age adults, especially those under the age of 40, individuals in low-income families, and people of color. So given this profile, it's easy to understand why Gen Z and millennials are most vocal about healthcare for all. So why won't it happen? As I have said countless times, if you ever have to question as to why things are the way they are in this country, the answer is almost always money and power. And as to the lack of universal health care, Here are three key reasons. Okay, first, American political culture traditionally prioritizes personal responsibility, private enterprise, and free markets over government-managed social welfare. You know, this fascinates me. In episode 39 of The Ruthless Truth, I asked the question, why no one seemed to care about poor white people. And the leading reason was that poor white people don't care about themselves. They reject government handouts or assistance because they believe it more aligns them with people of color than the white majority. They believe socialism, even though most of them can't define it, is un-American. Okay, second factor. Lack of healthcare is really not that prevalent a problem. Yes, 28 million Americans don't have health insurance coverage, and that's a big number. But it means that 300 million Americans are covered. So for most people, this issue does not affect them. And unfortunately, it's a small percentage of our population that cares about the welfare of others when they themselves are unaffected. And the third, and by far the greatest obstacle to universal health care, powerful and well-funded opposition. Groups like the American Medical Association and private health insurance companies have historically mounted aggressive opposition, such as campaigns branding national proposals as, quote, socialized medicine, to protect private sector interests and provider revenues. Healthcare interests spend more money lobbying Congress than any other U.S. economic sector, pouring hundreds of millions of dollars annually into campaign contributions and influence to shape federal drug pricing, insurance rules, and hospital reimbursements. Pharmaceuticals and drug makers, they spend the most, closely followed by health insurance and managed care. Universal health care would take billions of dollars out of their pockets. So, given all this, is it hopeless? Is there any chance universal health care will happen in the U.S.? Well, given the reasons I just mentioned, it's unlikely. However, I don't believe it's hopeless. There's no denying that a movement is underway, driven by the Democratic Socialists. Now, the establishment corporations and legislators are hoping this is a passing fad that won't get much traction. But as I've often said, the number one motivation of Congress people is re-election. If they start to feel vulnerable, they may change their tone. The midterms will be telling. So far, the Democratic Socialists have only been successful in unseating other Democrats. However, if we see establishment Republicans falling to Democratic Socialists in November, it may become a louder conversation. Now, do I believe we will see a total overhaul and implementation of Medicare for all? No, I don't. But I do believe there can be new policies and programs that provide more assistance and safety nets so that far fewer Americans have to deal with the stress and pain of a lack of health care. Your most powerful voice is your vote. Okay, let's get to today's American History Fun Fact. Today's American History Fun Fact. You know, I worked in corporate America for almost 30 years, and for the most part, I really enjoyed it. I embraced the challenges of growing a business in the midst of intense competition. And despite decades of examples, you still see businesses fail, not so much because of what their competition did, but what they did to themselves. Well, in today's American History Fun Fact, I will tell the story of a company that in just a 25-year span grew to be one of the largest and most successful businesses in the country, only to lose it all and have to shut down operations. Okay, David Cook. David Cook's initial business was a software services company, but in the early 1980s, he recognized the potential of video rentals, and in October 1985, he founded and opened the first Blockbuster video store in Dallas, Texas. The store inventory consisted of 8,000 VHS tapes and 2,000 Betamax tapes. Now, at that time, there were many small local video rental stores, but they typically carried fewer than 1,000 videos. Following early success from the company's first stores, Cook built a $6 million warehouse in Garland, Texas, to help sustain and support future growth that allowed new stores to open quickly. Blockbuster would often custom tailor a store's inventory to its neighborhood based on local demographics. Now, in 1987, Waste Management co-founder Wayne Huizenga agreed to acquire several Blockbuster stores, and his associate, John Milk, was particularly attracted to Blockbuster due to its efficiency, family-friendly, no pornography image, and their business model. Huizenga and Milk utilized techniques from their waste business, as well as McDonald's founders Ray Kroc's model of expansion to rapidly expand Blockbuster. And soon, they were opening a new store every 24 hours. Now, in 1989, Nintendo attempted to halt Blockbuster's ability to rent video games, filing multiple lawsuits and lobbying the U.S. Congress to ban the practice. Now, Nintendo ultimately lost, which paved the way for future video game rental. Now, during the early 1990s, Blockbuster was focused and active in acquiring video rental chains, including mid-Atlantic rival Arrows, which had more than 250 stores. At this point, although Blockbuster was a multi-billion-dollar company, Huizenga was worried about how new technology could threaten their business, such as video on demand and the growth of cable television. He looked at various entertainment ventures to diversify the business, but unable to come up with a proper solution about how to face the growing threats to the traditional video store. In 1994, he made the decision to sell Blockbuster to Viacom and just pull out. Okay? Now, before continuing the Blockbuster story, I just want to share my views on CEOs and what separates the great ones from the rest. When I was at LifeLock, as part of the process of preparing to go public, major investors would interview the leadership team, as outside of the product itself, they saw this as the most important factor for success. And I remember a financial executive asking me why I had joined LifeLock, given the limited business experience of the CEO. And I told him, Todd has the two most important qualities of a CEO. He has vision and he thinks big. I still contend the most important quality and skill of a CEO is to have vision. Okay, back to Blockbuster. In June 1997, Taco Bell president John Aniocco resigned from the company to become CEO of Blockbuster. Also that year, Warner Brothers offered Aniocco an exclusive rental deal. Seeing as DVDs were emerging as the new home video medium, Blockbuster was to have rights to rent new DVD releases for a period of time before they went on sale to the general public. And then the studio was to receive 40% of rental revenues in return, which was the same deal already in place for VHS rentals. Blockbuster turned the offer down, and the studio responded by lowering its DVD wholesale price in order to compete with the rental industry. Walmart seized the opportunity and in a few years surpassed Blockbuster as the studio's single largest source of revenue. Okay, on the Blockbuster scorecard, I'd call this strike one. Then in 2000, Netflix founders offered to sell their young company to Blockbuster for just $50 million. Now at that time, Blockbuster had over 9,000 stores, and management failed to see the long-term threat of subscription-based models and mail-order convenience over physical browsing, in a store. Blockbuster CEO, again, declined the offer and reportedly laughed. Executives viewed Netflix as an unprofitable niche startup, and they trusted their own dominant brick-and-mortar store model and their lucrative late fees. Okay, that's strike two. Now, a personal chapter to this story. In 2003, Blockbuster wanted me to accept the role of Chief Marketing Officer. I spent a day at the Dallas headquarters, had meetings with the CEO and other members of the executive team. And then the COO soon followed up and he wanted to gauge my interest. And we had a phone call and he said, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you rate your interest in Blockbuster? And I said, a 7 at best. Well, what will it take to get you to a 10? And then I just honestly, yet respectfully said, look, I know people have been writing the death notice for Blockbuster for 10 years, but this time, I actually think it's true. I just don't see a sustainable business model here. And that ended the discussions with Blockbuster. Okay, continuing with the Blockbuster story. In May 2005, financier Carl Icahn waged a successful bid to add himself and 2 other members to the board. He thought the Blockbuster CEO Aniako was overpaid and he was at odds with management on how to revive profit. Also in 2005, Blockbuster began a campaign promoting its, quote, no more late fees policy. The campaign proved controversial, with the Associated Press reporting that the new policy actually charged users the full price of the movie or game after 8 days, which they could cancel by returning the product in question and paying a fee. More than 40 states filed suit against the company for false advertising. Blockbuster later settled the suit by agreeing to refunds, as well as promising to better explain the policy. Strike 3. From there, the company flailed, pursuing multiple ventures that just didn't work out. In 2007, they named a new CEO, but the business continued to decline. And in 2010, they filed for bankruptcy. By 2014, only 50 stores remained, and as of today, there's only one Blockbuster location in the United States, and it is in Bend, Oregon. I think there are a couple of key lessons here. First, don't ever get too comfortable with your situation or success. Things can change quickly. Too many times, corporate arrogance led to a downfall that they never saw coming. Leading to point 2. True leadership comes from vision, meaning you can see things before most people do, and you can tell the future before it happens. This is the foundation of sound business planning. Okay, that's all I have for you today on The Ruthless Truth. Thank you so much for listening. Again, follow me on Instagram at TruthDavis5. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Ruthless Truth. And there's also a Facebook page, Ruthless Truth. I encourage all of you to look at past episodes. They cover a wide range of topics. I'm sure you'll find something of interest. Again, thank you for listening, and I'll talk to all of you soon.